Welcome to the 30th episode of Nerds and Friends. Today we have Anat Eliraz joining us today, our friend and author from Israel. Thank you so much for joining us today. We're so happy to have you. And let's
I'm
talk
so happy to be here.
Oh, awesome. Well, we're excited to talk about your book, Jewels of Smoky Quartz, which is an excellent title. I love it so much. Tell us a little bit about the book.
Okay. So the story is actually about a nurse who also practices martial arts.
Oh,
And one day she goes to practice out in nature and she finds herself in another world.
whoa.
Very
And
interesting.
the idea of the story is that she actually needs to use her skills and her wit to survive in this strange new place, which she doesn't recognize.
That's so cool.
And find her way as she learns different things along the story.
Nice. What kind of other world does she find herself in?
It's mostly, let's say, very D&D-ish medieval kind of world.
Awesome.
I know it's like everybody is talking, okay, it's so boring. We have so many worlds of this kind. That's the settings I love best. So that's what works for me.
Yeah.
Well, you got to write what appeals to you. And like,
Exactly.
I personally subscribe to the concept of like, it doesn't really matter if it's something that's been seen before, as long as it's like an original take. I mean, how many versions of Die Hard are there? Or the Hitman on a Vengeance thing has been done a million times, but everybody loves John Wick right now. Like that, if it's fun and you enjoy writing it, that I think that comes through, and I think that's
Absolutely.
like I think it's really cool that you decided to write something like that. What inspired this? What brought up this particular idea?
Well, the idea itself came from just an evening with nothing specific. And I don't remember if it was like a talk with a friend or something that was on TV. And came up the question of, do we have free will or not? Now you can talk about it philosophically or religiously. It doesn't matter. I'm not actually going into the details of belief. And that was the main question: do we have free will or not? And that evening, my husband was abroad, and I was having free time, and I was just playing with the idea of it. And this kind of conversation between two characters came to mind. Not every sentence they were saying, but the idea, the concept of them throwing around this question. And that was it. And actually, that's the climax of the story as well. So
That's cool.
Very cool.
I love that. So it culminates with this adventure and characters exploring free will in this new world. That makes sense when you have a character who's been transported to a totally new setting, that she's got a lot of questions about her fate and her future and how the world works. So, I got goosebumps. That sounds really cool. I can't wait to read it. That's awesome.
I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah.
Well, and you can assume something as interestingly specialized as someone who is a nurse and somebody who does martial arts would be very interesting in a fantasy realm, because you've got somebody who has, on one side, you've got the benefit of a far more scientific background of the physical body than most people have, let alone, depending on the realm of the fantasy universe, something that's technically between the Dark Ages and the Renaissance normally. And then you've got martial arts, which, like, no shit, the reason that in legend people are like, this was the greatest warrior, was because that would like there's a good chunk of stories that kind of boil down to, this was the one guy in the country that could use a sword. And
Yeah.
And like, I can just imagine, I made an assumption. What kind of martial art does she do?
Okay, so it's a kind of a combination between two.
Uh-huh.
It's both Aikido and Jiu-Jitsu. I practiced Aikido for quite a few years, since 1999, and stopped when I started my family. So when pregnant, I was not going to roll around on the mattress anymore.
No joint locks for you.
No,
Japanese or Brazilian
people
jiu-jitsu?
did it, but no, that was
Yeah, maybe not.
coming from my other background. I said no.
I take it you have a nursing background as well?
So I'm a physiotherapist.
Oh, awesome.
But you know, I worked with nurses for over 15 years now, and it's a very day-to-day experience in both working together, both learning from each other. Okay, I can't do what they do, but I can talk to them about it. And so I took the inspiration from there.
That's awesome.
Very cool.
You got to write what you know, and that's bringing that background in is really cool. And it adds a lot of authenticity that the readers really appreciate, That's really cool.
Yeah. So I came back to the martial arts now a few years ago when the girls grew up, and
That's
I
awesome.
could have some free time some evenings, and
Nice.
Very cool.
Until the corona broke up.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but we're kind of quite back to training. So
that's
I
good.
hope it stays that way.
Yeah, I started doing, when the pandemic started, I started doing Krav Maga, but we had to do it with masks on, and it was and socially distanced. So I think I'm a pretty basic white belt, given that I had to wear a mask
from lack of oxygen.
Well, I almost did, but I think it was less the mask and more being woefully out of shape. But
I mean, that's kind of the interesting thing about forms. Like, not to be a martial arts nerd about everything, but one of the cool things about practicing forms versus just sparring is when you practice forms, you're building patterns for different moves and how moves flow into each other. And when you're sparring, you're reacting to a partner. So they kind of like they work different parts of the brain. So even and it applies, like, I say forms coming from a very, very early Kung Fu background. But like that applies to, I think that applies to the bag, like just hitting a heavy bag. I think that applies to like the workout. I think that applies to, in a very broad sense, to kind of bring it back. I actually think that applies to writing, because it's kind of the difference between improvisation and being able to plan out what you're going to do next, and when those kind of flow into each other when you're in a writing state. Have you experienced that before? Like, have you ever like started a scene with a plan and ended up in a totally different place or with a totally different vibe than you thought?
Well, I didn't start any scene with a plan, so
Awesome. Okay.
I like it.
Improv everywhere. We're gonna start with a game called Big Booty, Big Booty, and then we're gonna zip zap zap, and then boom, the book. Okay. That is a very niche joke for something I have not attended, but I know a couple improv comics. So
I was gonna say that joke went right over my head.
That is all United Citizens Brigade, like really stupid shit. So okay, I'm not saying that. All right, for all of our improv comedian fans, all one of you, all one of you. Like, I am not knocking on your particular cult. If it works for you, go for it. I just think it's funny. Okay, go now. Onward.
So did you ever outline?
I'm a total panster. It's
nice.
I really didn't plan anything in advance. I was writing scenes and then just juggling them together and deciding which one comes before which one. And actually, the last scene I wrote was something that happens somewhere in the middle of the book. It's about a 7-8 page scene, and it took me about as long as it took me the whole book to write.
Really?
Just to write that part.
Tell us more about that. That's
The whole
fascinating.
book was finished. It's just
Mhm.
that specific scene.
So is that just so in general terms, was that scene like your hinge? Was that what did it take that long because this was something that like was extremely important to the plot, or what was
Vice
it?
versa.
Vice versa. So the rest of the book was important to the scene.
It's like I was joking that, that in movies, when you need the time to pass, then they make a car chase or something like that.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So they needed to get from point A to point B. Yes, they
Uh-huh.
needed to talk about some things on the way, but there wasn't really much juice into that scene. And it was like, it's kind of boring. There's nothing really interesting. And I was trying to figure out how to write it so it will not be boring, because I don't want the reader to put the book down, because now comes 74 pages about how they unpack there.
So here's an interesting way of relating to that, because I'm a huge movie nerd. There's a movie that came out in 2018, 2019 called Mandy. It's a Nicolas Cage horror revenge movie. It's very, very visual. It's an extremely interesting movie. It's from Elijah Wood's horror studio.
Okay.
But one of the interesting things that's like a hinge of the movie, and it's maybe a minute long, is actually Nicolas Cage after basically being assaulted by a cult. He wakes up, he walks back into his house, and the TV is on, and there is this commercial for a like mac and cheese, and it's the weirdest thing. It's the Cheddar Goblin, so it's kind of like the Trix Rabbit doing like a Kraft mac and cheese commercial. And the reason that the movie hinges around that, because there's very intense story driven stuff that happens before, and that's like the halfway point, is there's kind of this weird existential thing where you realize that like the world does not care about your pain, and that it is marching on in the weirdest possible way. And that's really reading into something that is insanely dorky, very effects driven, like this one scene. But it's fascinating how a single scene can do that.
Exactly.
To stuff like this.
Yeah. So what was some of the
put it
stuff?
on my to see list.
It's quite a movie. Me and Carey watched it together, I remember, and I was like, whoa. Like,
highly recommended. It is a different level of weird, and I'm all about that different level of weird.
yeah. Well, it had very much like kind of 70s pulpy fantasy tones towards the end.
Mhm.
With some of the wide shots. It's a fun movie. It's yeah.
Yeah, it's got that nice like late 70s, early 80s bridge like style. I love when you can see good influence in that.
Yeah. So Anat, I have to ask, have you played Dungeons and Dragons before? You mentioned that it's a fellow D&D nerd. We love it.
Yeah. I
Excellent.
started around 87 or 88.
Nice.
Like no, maybe even before 86 or 87, something like that.
That's awesome.
I was around 8 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I was
That's
the
so cool.
annoying little sister that had a big brother and sister, much older than me, that were playing. And yes, you have to let me play as well.
What
Awesome.
do you remember what your first character was? Like what kind of class? Or
Yeah, I was a halfling fighter.
yes. Carey plays a halfling fighter in my game. That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I'm almost positively sure that if I ask my sister, she'll remember his name. I don't remember his name, but yeah, I remember the character himself. He was a male, and yeah, that was the first one, and I played a lot through the 90s. Early 90s, all through high school mostly.
That's
We
awesome.
had like a nice group that we used to meet almost every weekend. Remember, I mean, I don't know, here there were no phones, there was no internet, there was at that time. I mean, no mobile phones or smartphones or whatever. So yeah, so we met and we binge played holidays, it was like, okay, we start at 7, 8 in the evening, play until 5, 6 in the morning, go to
Yes.
sleep, wake up, eat, continue playing.
Oh, that's
Mhm.
awesome. That's the way to do it.
That is power gaming as it absolutely needs to be done. Because
Yes.
yeah, as a guy who picked it up in late middle school, early high school with my friends, like I completely respect that.
Yeah, that's so awesome. That's the way to do it. That's so cool.
And
Well,
it
yeah,
sounds
that-
like you. Sorry.
Oh,
Go ahead.
no, go ahead, Carey.
Well, I was going to say, it sounds like you caught the bug. Like it sounds like because this is something that influenced your book writing. Like
I think it
is
did.
well, is this special to you for a reason? Like, is it like what is it hit in your brain that that makes this like I want to create a world based around this concept?
Well, from an early age, I wrote. I mean, even if you take the very early fantasy books, I can't say about things from the 70s because I was too young to read it.
Mhm.
But if we're talking when the D&D started coming out and then the Dragonlance books came out.
I was just about to ask,
and
like, is it like, are you a Dragonlance person? Because those
it
were,
was one
yeah.
of the first worlds that I got to be acquainted to. Let's put it this way. Yes, I love Forgotten Realms more than what later on when we found out about it. But I think Dragonlance was one of the first worlds I managed to read books about or see adventures made on the basis of the world itself. And yeah, and I have like a song I wrote from, I think it's 92.
Nice.
Which was just after I finished like the second time reading one of the Dragonlance series, and it's like a conversation between someone and Raceland. So
Nice.
That's so
kind
cool.
of like a dialogue between two characters. And so I have lots of small either songs, poems, I don't even know what they're exactly called.
Yeah.
And I have tons of unfinished stories that most of them the ideas for them came from adventures we were doing in the D&D.
See, I think that's so awesome that you became a fan of this world and then you contributed to the world and became part of it. Like, that's so neat. I love that.
Yeah, that's absolutely magical. I mean, hell, that's one of the reasons why I started loving Led Zeppelin so much when I was also in high school, was you listened to Ramble On, and it's like, did they just say Gollum at the evil wall? Like, what the fuck is that? And then you're listening to the Battle of Evermore, and someone's like, oh yeah, that's based off the Battle of Pelennor Fields in the Return of the King. You're like, what the fuck is, like, because, like, sorry, here's Carey's music nerd tangent. Led Zeppelin at the time was the heaviest fucking band in the world. Like, they were the death metal of the time. Very bad analogy, but like, they were heavy. Like, nobody was really doing like that broad orchestral, like, deep sound that they were doing. And they're writing about Tolkien. Like, that to me is awesome. Like, the influence that goes on from there. And the cool thing is, like, people love putting things into multimedia. Like, like, you cannot tell me that Star Wars would be the same thing if it weren't for fantasy. Like, specifically on the movie on the movie nerd version. It's because like, part of the tone and the themes is because George Lucas was a huge fan of Kurosawa films.
Yes.
And he put it, like, there are so many references to early Kurosawa films in just A New Hope. Like, and like the love letters of, like, this is something I want to create that is like original idea gets a little bit too like narrow for me, but this is an idea that I want to run with. And part of this is I want to put the things I love into this. And I so that's that, like, I got like super excited and nerdy there, but like, I want to know, like, how that applies to your writing, because it sounds like Dragonlance, D&D, the medical profession, being in a situation that you're not normally in. These all seem like things that you want to give credence to in your book. And how does that all mesh together for you?
In many ways, because, for example, my background in the medical field puts some parts into the main character. I've been having ridiculously funny and interesting conversations with doctors and nurses when I was writing certain parts to make sure that I'm getting things correct as much as possible.
Excellent, a fellow research hound. I love it.
Excuse me?
I said excellent, a fellow research hound. I'm all about it.
And then I had the martial arts, which both I've trained in, and I've talked to martial artists that are far better trained than me. I'm not like black belts or so in my workout, but to understand more about, I'll explain it a little differently. My sensei, which is actually the sensei I've known from over 20 years ago.
Oh, that's awesome.
And came back to train with him. One of the things I loved about the way he trains is that he's very real life. He has an onlook on the martial arts as, this is not a dance, this is not a sport, this is self-defense. And he'll never come and say, sure, you're gonna stop the knife and you're gonna cause your opponent to flip 3 times through the air, and okay. He's totally realistic. And every time someone comes and starts asking him and say, look, if someone comes to attack you with a knife, you're probably going to get hurt. The difference is, are you going to come out of it dead or alive?
There you go.
So I like the reality of it. I like the fact that he's not selling me stories.
Yeah.
And what he does either works or will never work. Okay. It's, even if you take Aikido, which is a much softer martial arts with a lot of fluent movements, it's a wonderful martial art to learn how to cause your body to move. I think in an amazing way. You understand things about how your joints work, and you learn how to tumble and you learn how to swing through the air. Yes, you know how to do it. But in reality, if I'll have someone 2 meters tall come and attack me, I'll probably be able to throw him, but it's not going to look nice like in the movies that he's going to fly with both feet over my head. No.
Yeah, because he's not a stuntman. Like he's not leaning into it. But there's that realism there.
Exactly, and I like the realism. I like not to be told, yeah, of course you're going to be able to do everything and protect yourself from anyone who's going to attack you. I want to be ready for the truth, and the truth hurts sometimes. That's the fact. So
yeah,
I hope I'll never have to use it, but I'm taking into account that nobody is selling me stories.
Yeah,
and that comes into the main character as well. So
that's awesome.
It's both things that she remembers what her sensei says along the way, and the actual fact that she gets hurt. She's fighting in different situations, and she's not invincible. So
that's great, because I've found that when characters kind of have that plot armor or that invincibility, it pulls you out of the story. So I think that's really epic that your character is human, and that makes the character get rooted for by the audience even more. That's great.
Absolutely.
And if you take it into the D&D games, then the second MC is based on characters I played.
That's cool.
You don't get too much information about him in the first book. He'll develop more, But the idea of, I used to like to play characters with a very shadowy gray background. Not that they're evil, but the fact that they have a lot of things that they're holding back or hiding, and they have a good reason to hide it for whichever reason the DM put to that specific game. So he's very much the how do you call it? Like the prototype of the characters I used to love to play.
That's awesome.
And I had one game that I think we played it for about 2.5 years in concession, that it was a game, not that we passed into a fantasy world, but the world itself changed into a fantasy world, which the DM made a game that suddenly one day all technology stopped. Every person that played or was familiar with fantasy actually changed into either one of his favorite characters, but as himself. I mean, if he was a mage, then he'll be a mage, but himself, but in the body, in his own body, not in his character's body. If he was whichever, so they changed into their own characters, and bit by bit, except for the normal wildlife that Earth holds, suddenly all kinds of fantasy creatures started appearing. And you had to deal with what you had, which means in the beginning you could raid stores and get all kinds of supplies, but afterwards you needed to start thinking how you're surviving and what you're doing and what's going on, and is it reversible or is it a new reality? And
that sounds brilliant. I'd love to play in that.
In itself.
That's so cool. I love that concept.
I do have this idea I've been kind of kicking around since college that kind of sounds like that, where it's mostly like, it would mostly be a comedy and like kind of played for yucks, but I got told like I have to have like big scientific stuff dumbed down for me because I'm not like that smart.
I would debate that, but anyway.
Somebody was telling me about theoretical physics, and you got to break it down into like very soft sci-fi terms, right? The quantum version of dimensions would eventually collide, and things would change on in levels that are both perceptible and imperceptible. Like there are certain things that would be completely the same, or like there would be things that would seem like they're the same as they've always been, but it's like, oh yeah, there's that brontosaurus that lives over on La Cienega, like like shit like that. But there would also be people that would be completely like schismed from that. And I had this really weird idea of like dimensions were slowly like mashing together in kind of that way, where things are becoming kind of like an anime version of Monty Python almost. Like things are going a little bit nuts, and there's like 3 people across the world that like are still like are actively aware of everything that is changing, and they're different levels of like I'm going insane, or oh no, not this again. And it sounds like something like, and it's that thing you're talking about, like, is this permanent? Is this going to change? Like, are the dimensions going to pass through each other and be completely different again? Like, what is, and the comedy, the drama, and everything that's around like a concept like that sounds really fun. So I'm interested in that.
Well, Anat, I want to ask you, how many books do you have planned for your series? Because you mentioned a second book, and I'm like, ooh, it sounds like there's more stuff happening. I like it.
So actually 2.
Nice.
When I wrote this book, Jewels of Smoky Quartz, it was supposed to be a standalone, but as I was kind of finishing the last parts of it, I had an idea for something else that can continue.
Oh,
so
nice.
I kind of left the ending open, which means the book itself, the story in the book, does come to a closure. You can read it on its own, and that's fine. But you can still have the possibility to continue on. And some of the characters will have larger parts in the second book, and more things about the world will be cleared out, because most of the book is written from the main character's point of view, and she's not from this world. So she doesn't know how things are run. She doesn't know the political issues. She doesn't know the religious issues. She's not familiar with any of it. So you don't get it in most of the book.
Yeah.
There's like very small hints of it, but not how things actually work. So you do know there is magic, but you don't know how far and how it works yet, because
like what the systems
she
are.
doesn't
Yeah.
know it.
Oh, that's cool. I love that.
So these are things that will get more information in the next book. And actually right now, as I see it, it's going to end at the end of the next book, because that's part of the idea I had for the next book. So
that's awesome.
for that one, it's planned just for 2. I'm actually also writing another fantasy or paranormal, I don't know exactly which category to put it into, which happens on Earth during World War II. And I'm using information that I did about a 2-year research about. So
oh wow, that's fascinating.
And I kind of got an idea of how to put it into a story. So I think I'll continue with that too.
Yeah, that sounds really good.
I was laughing with a friend that about 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago, I was doing something in the morning and suddenly I had an idea for another story. And I was like, Anat, how did politics end up in your story? And I hate politics. I hate real life politics, and I hate stories with too much politics in them.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not only politics, but it has a lot of all the deceit and all the this is working behind this one's back and how this one is related. And don't ask me, I don't know how it came up, but maybe one day it will also become another book.
You write what you're feeling, right?
Yep.
That's awesome.
I love that.
Well, Anat, I wanted to ask, what's the main character in your book's name?
Oh, I'm kind of wondering if I should say it or not, because actually lots of reviews already reveal the name.
oh, it's like a secret. Okay, you don't have to say it on the podcast.
No, I'm laughing because the reader doesn't get the name at the beginning of the book.
Oh, that's cool. Well, because it's from her point of view, right?
It's from her point of view,
that makes
and
sense.
only later you actually get her name. So if you really want to know, I'll tell you. But if,
no, let's leave it a mystery, because I'm gonna read your book, so I want to leave that a mystery.
The mystery is it's Margaret Thatcher. It's
oh God. No, that's exciting. For our listeners, where can they buy your book? I figure it's on Amazon, right?
It's on Amazon.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Both paperback and ebook. It's also on Kindle Unlimited for free. So if anyone is interested, can read it there. When I published it, I got a few paperback copies made here that I had a crowdfunding done for publishing the book, because it's
nice.
Something a little above my abilities to do on my own.
Nice.
So it was neat, because in the end, it actually did some publicity and some advertising for the whole thing, because part of the idea of the crowdfunding was that you give a certain amount, but the book, some people brought bookmarks and so on.
Oh, that's neat.
Stickers and stuff that we made for the book itself. So
that's so
it was
cool.
kind of neat.
I dig that.
Yeah, I love that ebooks are a thing now, and I know my books are on Kindle Unlimited as well for free, but I like having a physical book. So I'm going to check out a paperback of yours after this podcast because
Oh yeah, always go physical if you
of
can.
course.
Oh, it's a great cover. I love that. That's awesome.
Thank you.
That's so cool. Well, Anat, is there any other place our listeners can find you on like social media? They can give you a follow to see your future projects?
Yeah. Well, best place to find me is Facebook. That's where I'm mostly active, and I'm happy to talk with anyone. You can reach me through the messages on Facebook or the personal. Here it's called Messenger. I don't know. I understand it's not the same in every Facebook.
No, it's called Messenger here too. Yeah.
Okay. No, fine. So always happy to answer. And one of the things I really love is actually talking to my readers while they're reading, because it's so nice to get not like just the review at the end that kind of sums everything up, but they read a certain scene and then it's like, oh my days, da, 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 da.
Yes,
so
that's the best feedback, to see what people are thinking as they read it.
Interestingly, like you know how books used to be released, like how
serialized in chapters, right?
Serialized, yeah, like first thing that came to my brain is A Christmas Carol, like that was actually like serialized in several parts. Like I always thought that would be kind of cool to make like novellas. Like if you had a book that really lent itself to novella length, like chapters, or like releasing it one chapter at a time, either online or like 99 cents a chapter kind of thing. Like I always thought that'd be kind of a really cool way of putting something out there, especially if it all like came together into one like big book. So I
actually I had started writing something like that, but it's not fantasy related. It's
it's a medical journal.
I had an idea, the idea for, like you said, like small chapters or kind of novella series, was the idea that people can get it while they ride the train, and you can kind of read it on the way to work or the way back. Or I used to ride the train when I was a university student from where we lived, and it's kind of I read while I was on the train, and then I said, wouldn't it be neat like to have small books that you can kind of read small chapters or small parts and not forget where you were, because you don't have chapters that are 30 or 40 pages long.
Yeah.
So
that sounds really cool.
It was more of a kind of sarcastic, funny series about it. I'll try to translate it into English. I hope it will make the same sense. It's like stories from the tummy, which was supposed to be funny stories about pregnancies.
Oh, okay.
And then it was stories. It has kind of a double meaning in Hebrew, but it's like stories from mother-in-laws.
Oh, okay.
Nice.
Kind of and like a series about funny things, family related, and different levels of family relations. But
that sounds really fun and very witty. I like that.
Yeah. That sounds incredibly creative.
Yeah, fun. That's awesome.
Oh yeah, one more thing. So anyway, sorry.
Yes, no, please, let's hear it.
Best place to find me, Facebook. I think my page is also open for everybody, because I did the whole I kind of posted about all the crowdfunding I did and all the publishing levels that I went through. So if people can get any information that can help them, they're welcome. Of course, it's relevant to my country, so things are a little different between here and other countries. But still,
we could do a whole podcast on that too. I'm fascinated. I love learning more about other countries.
No, it's terrible.
No. Oh, it's
terrible.
Yeah.
the bureaucracy about it is like, I was at one point, I don't think I'm going to publish another book.
Oh, no.
Jesus.
Just from political bureaucracy?
Because I needed to like open, how do you call it? It's like
Get a
small
business license or
as an author. And
like you had to kind of
I had to do everything considering with income tax and stuff like that. Which is, sorry, it's probably very boring, but
no, it's fascinating, but it sounds like a headache for sure.
It's a very big headache. And I was like, this is such a headache that if I have to go through this again, I'm not sure I'm gonna do this.
Not sure I'm gonna. Yeah, that sounds like a huge pain in the ass. Sorry, sorry you had to deal with that.
And but hopefully, if I did it the first time, it's gonna be simpler next round. But
that's good.
I'll have to learn it the hard way and see how it goes.
Well, we want to read the second book, so we're rooting for you.
Absolutely.
Worst case, I'll just put it free and say everybody can read it. If I'm not getting money for it, nobody can come and complain that I didn't pay my taxes.
Yeah, seriously. all donation based on Patreon. Just release your book on Patreon. Like, pay what the fuck you want. It's for charity, and the charity is me. Go to hell.
I love it. That's great.
It's released it's released only in the Bahamas. A tax shelter, maybe. Come and find me. I'm releasing this, like all of my money on Patreon goes immediately into a Swiss bank account. So try and track that. It's just like, well, I she said it, so like, what can we do?
Well, that's exciting. Well, again, for all of our listeners, check out Jewels of Smoky Quartz on Amazon. Follow Anat Eliraz on Facebook. Thank you so much for coming on our podcast. This was great.
You're very welcome. It was fun.
So fun. We can't wait to have you on again. This was a great conversation, and maybe we'll get to play D&D sometime in the future over video chat. That'd be wonderful.
Now that there are all the Zoom options, it's you don't need to be in the same country to play the game anymore. So
in some of my games, I have players in Australia and Belgium. It's great. Yeah, we just all play over Discord. It's awesome.
Honestly, the thought of making a play-by-post that is also a video thing would be kind of like hilarious. Where it's like you have 2 minutes to like the DM is going to narrate something and you have 2 minutes to respond.
Let's play with a hybrid. I like that. It's a dumb, weird idea, but anyway, I'm detracting. But like, no, we're gonna explore that more. I like where your head's at. That's good.
thanks for talking to us, Anat. This was a great conversation.
It was great. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Well, we'll share this on Facebook once it's posted, and really appreciate having you, and can't wait to have you on again.
Thank you.
Of course. Thanks so much.
Have a good one.